What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
Already in the beginning of the noughties, the BMW management decided that the audience of the mass segment C should be taken quite seriously, and this audience is ready to join the values peculiar to the Bavarian cars. The concern has already had the corresponding experience. Sedans and coupes. BMW E36 compact, produced from 1993 to 2004, could be taken as a basis. Only the hatchback type body characteristic for the segment was needed. And so in 2002 in Geneva was shown a concept BMW CS1 created under the direction of Chris Bangle, and in 2004 in Paris, the European public for the first time saw the future bestseller, the serial BMW 1 Series. It is curious that Russian journalists attached the nickname Kopeka to the model in 2002, 2 years before the start of serial production. Initially, 3-door E81 and 5-door hatchbacks E87 appeared on the market. In 2007 the family was supplemented by a coupe E82, and in 2008 and a convertible E88. Initially, buyers were offered two inline 4-cylinder gasoline engines, N45B16, 1.6-litre, 115 horsepower, and N45B20 for 2 litres. In two versions of power, 130 and 150 horsepower, as well as a 2-litre turbo diesel M47TU2D20, producing 122 or 163 horsepower. Cars with these engines were designated as 116i, 118i, 120i, 118D and 120D. In 2007, the power of the 118i engine was increased to 136 horsepower, 120i to 170 horsepower. A year earlier, in 2006, the range of engines was supplemented by 3-litre inline 6s and 52B30 with an output of 265 horsepower. They were equipped with 125i and 130i models, and in 2008 under the hood of the flagship versions appeared an N54B30 with an output of 306 horsepower. The range of diesels also changed. 1 Series began to be equipped with a new 2-litre turbo diesel N47D20 with an output of 143, 177 and 204 horsepower. These motors were paired with 6-speed manual and 6-speed automatic ZF6 HP19, but in 2006, a more reliable box 6 HP21 was used as well as an American automatic GM6L45, 6L50. A French assembly was added. And it is possible to find out what exactly the box is on this or that car only by VIN number. Suspension of the car was completely borrowed from the new, at that time, tricycle in E90 body in front, McPherson struts, rear suspension, multi-lever. The suspension was offered in two variants, standard, the word speaks for itself, and a sport, with shock absorbers of greater rigidity and reduced ground clearance. In addition, there were two variants of steering, the usual, 3 turns of the steering wheel from stop to stop, and with an active steering rack, 1.6 turns from stop to stop. All BMW 1 Series were produced only at the German plants in Leipzig and Regensburg. In 2014, there was a change of generations and there were units in the body F20, F21, well, the first generation cars are firmly established in the secondary market, where they can be bought at a price from 450,000 rubles for a modest 3-door hatchback 116i. 2008, with mileage of more than 250 km to 2,400,000, so much asked for a coupe 135i. The same 2008. There are also many intermediate options, including enough cars with a nameplate 116i 2010 to 2011 with mileage of about 100,000 kilometers and at a price of 800 to 950,000 rubles. Let's leave alone powerful coupes and convertibles. They have their own buyer, especially since these cars have every chance to move into the category of collectible. But how rational is the purchase of ordinary BMW 1 Series? Is it worth it? Let's see what their owners write about coupes. BMW cars in Russia can be safely called image cars. On the one hand, this means that there are quite a lot of them on the secondary market. But there are two sides to every coin. And in the case of BMW, the reverse side of the coin is the difficulty of finding a car that suits you. Firstly, a lot of Bavarian pennies were purchased in rather poor configurations. And today's buyers want to get the maximum possible for the spent money, that is to find a car with leather interior, climate control, xenon, sport multirole and professional stereo, and preferably in decent technical condition. And such cars are devilishly few. After all, any BMW in Russia is considered a kid's car, and the BMW 1 Series is also a youth car. Yes, these cars were less often taken by boys from the neighborhood in order to race, but all the same they were often raced in the tail and in the manner, not giving due importance to timely and quality service. As a result, we get such a picture. It is quite real to find a live car, but most likely it will be not exactly what you want. Let's say, 116i with 155 horsepower engine and automatic, which was previously driven by a young woman, with a high degree of probability will be quite clean and well-groomed. But only such car will not impress you with its dynamics, and the interior will be either fabric or combined, fabric plus leather Sensatech. And all would be good, but in the automobile of such age leather will surely be cracked. And here variants with rich completions, as a rule, were equipped with more powerful motors, but, alas, most likely, such cars were exploited rather harshly, and they fall into the category of shabby. Of course, and they can be brought to their senses, but the price of reanimation measures may be 150 to 300,000 and be simply unacceptable. But in any case, experienced owners believe that good options are live on the body and motor, less than 700,000 rubles in 2022. To find almost unrealistic, and it is better to look closer to the upper price bar. It should be taken into account that if the car is equipped with an automatic box GM, not ZF, it is worth immediately prepare 50 to 60,000 to buy a contract box and work. If the previous owners were fond of driving sideways, then be ready to spend 30 to 40,000 for reassembly steering rack and all consumables, well, and another 20 to 30,000 on the rear floating silent blocks and the suspension itself on trifles. Not a bad variant for family use can be 120D with diesel engine, but there are difficulties here. At purchase of such cars it is obligatory diagnostics with passion up to removal of the cylinder head. Because the liner crack in the block or scoring can be detected with the help of an endoscope, the state of the timing chain can be checked with the help of a special device, removing the chain tensioner, but the crack of the partition in the cylinder block can be seen only by visual inspection on the removed block. If all this is neglected, you should be prepared for unpleasant surprises. Nevertheless, in general, according to the owners, the initial investments when buying a moderate BMW of the first series are quite in line with the rule of 1,000, which today corresponds to expenses at the level of 60 to 70,000 rubles, and if you want to slightly improve the equipment, then 1.5 times more. Here's how a fairly typical report on costs after buying a BMW 116i 1.6 115 horsepower looks like. Repair of the car for a year. About 100,000 rubles. This repair, I suppose, will be enough for 4 years. What was done? Oil change, BMW original, installed by Xenon, LED optics. Repair of air conditioning, radiators were removed, washed, on the grills installed grids, new candles original BMW, ignition coils. New pads and front shock absorbers BMW. Installed professional Parktronic, new battery. BMW 1 Series, E87, 2004-14. In any case, premium segment cars should not be bought with the last money and in questionable condition. It should be understood that restoration costs can be significant, and proper diagnostics and quality repair can be provided by not every Uncle Vasya. Find the right professional who loves BMWs, and then all the natural problems associated with age and mileage will be fixed gracefully and at a reasonable price. Except that finding that right professional isn't easy either. In very many reviews, a simple thought is heard: BMW 1 Series can be a great option for a novice driver. Naturally, we are talking about versions with modest motors, first of all, about Model 116i. Yes, a person who has some experience of driving more powerful cars can wrinkle his nose, call coupe under BMW and think that 115 horses is sad and dreary. But it is not important. It is important that one is a very good variant to try to understand what, in fact, fans of the brand are so fanatical about. What is so special about it? Design. To put it bluntly, not everyone likes the design language of Bavarian cars, and it has its fair share of critics. I like BMW design. The less I like it, the more I get to know the world. The purpose of design is to tell a tale, and they turn out to have chosen listeners with money and gouge. As for the design of the first series, there is enough enthusiasm. The design of the car fascinates. Exterior, both glamorous and predatory. Appearance on excellent, but there is also enough skepticism. Appearance on the lover reminds a cap onion. Looks like a Wehrmacht helmet, and the lion's share of criticism refers to hatchbacks E81 and E87 and rapture to the coupe E82. And only owners of a few convertibles, body E88, are absolutely unanimous, the most beautiful convertible on the market, just out of competition. Little Aristocrat, the most beautiful of BMW models up to 2011. And of all convertibles until today. But the main thing in the one is not the appearance, but the highest values of BMW, rear-wheel drive and perfect handling, which it provides. Even those who think that a car can be only German understand, if you want comfort, you can take Mercedes. If you want a balanced car with all-wheel drive, Audi, but if you like sporty driving, your choice is BMW. And for a novice driver to get used to the peculiarities of Bavarian chassis control, it is quite possible to practice on Cat's I E on not the most dynamic 116i. It is quite dangerous to learn on cars with power more than 200 horsepower. They do not forgive mistakes, and, as the owner of 265 horsepower 130i rightly notes, it is very easy to get killed on it, especially when you are young. It is worth recognizing, very many authors of reviews express their disappointment with the interior of the unit. Naturally, this applies primarily to relatively inexpensive configurations. The most widespread configuration with an automatic is a dynamic invalid. And without climate and with twist wheels, it is also a climatic invalid. Some kind of climate-free without motivation. Horror. Do not buy such cars, they only discredit the BMW brand, and you will not be able to love it. The configuration a la poor student. Weak engine and plastic steering wheel. I've never driven such simple cars before. According to the authors of reviews, the interior is too simple, Spartan and laconic. First of all, by the materials used. The materials of trim are hard. Plastic everywhere is so bad. Plastic on the panel could be, of course, softer. Everything is very simple, even Spartan. Flat seats, flat scales, minimum design for the sake of design, cheap plastic. There is some breadbox on the panel. The interior is unpretentious, and without climate it is so shabby. I did not like the interior trim. It concerns a front panel, rigid, and plastic by quality. As at Priora, the interior is very simple. This model, as a rule, has fabric seats, which absorb a lot of dust and dirt. From a drop of water can remain unpleasant stains. In general, everything is made for the driver not to admire the interior, but to concentrate on driving. Even realizing that a budget model is a budget model to have minimal equipment, the owners do not like the fact that all this somehow does not correspond to the premium status of the brand, and that they are deprived of many of life's benefits, which today are included in the basic equipment of many mass-segment models. There is no multiroll, no climate control, no Bluetooth, and no MP3 in principle. The standard steering wheel of a 5-door hatchback is like that of a bus, big and thin, which somehow does not correspond to the image of BMW, the standard acoustics of BMW business. Even with the EQ fully turned up, gives a sound that, to put it bluntly, does not correspond to the premium class. At the same time, the owners admit that there are no complaints about the quality of the interior assembly and the convenience of the driver and front passenger, except that there is nowhere to put a smartphone. But they frankly do not like the capacity of the rear part of the salon. In the case of giants on the front seats, there is little space for passengers in the back. Getting into the car from behind requires attention and accuracy. It is far from the doors of an off-roader. Landing on the front seats is normal because of wide front doors, but it is unusual because it reminds of landing with the fifth point on the level of asphalt. The first thing you meet when getting into the car is the thought that you will have to do yoga. It is not so easy to get into the car. There is no space on the rear sofa. Therefore, I do not see any sense in rear doors on this car. There is very little space in the back, just very little. The car is for 2 people. It becomes cramped for 3-inch. There is practically no space for rear passengers. When two people sit comfortably in the front, nobody will sit in the back, passengers have to be tight. In general, it is not fatal while the children are small, but then it is difficult. So, if to proceed from reviews, BMW 1 Series can be considered as a car with 2+2 seating formula. The massive transmission tunnel prevents to seat the third passenger. As for the trunk, owners of different bodies estimate them differently. Some owners of hatchbacks tell that the trunk fits winter stroller, 3 large sports bags and some other little things. There is no case that something necessary was not included, not fixed. In the trunk I put a summer folding thick children's stroller plus 2 to 3 household bags, and so something small. Others say in the style of, we have enough if the seats are not folded. The trunk is small, but I, for example, do not need more. A load of groceries for a month from a hypermarket fits in. And this is about 8 5-liter bottles of water, a couple of packages of toilet paper on 10 rolls and 4 to 5 large bags of groceries. To put it simply, it's a big cart with a slide. But if the rear seats are folded, everything changes quite radically. Thanks to the hatchback body and folding rear sofa, I transported both doors and a refrigerator on the car. If you fold the 2 rear seats, you can put the refrigerator and carry it to the dacha. The rear sofa is folded, and voila. A bicycle with the removal of the front wheel and sometimes 2 inside. But the owners of convertibles complain that the trunk is good only for putting something necessary, for example, a subwoofer, and if in winter to throw there a spare tire, there will be no space for anything at all. All this leads to the fact that owners are very skeptical about the prospect of long journeys on this car. For everyday life and short trips to the countryside, it's the best. But if you are going to travel, you should look for a more spacious car. For long distances, no problem if you travel maximum 2. But I bought this car for myself as an egoist stroller. It is comfortable in the cabin, but only for 2 people. The trunk is for the city, not for moving or long journeys. As a result, insufficient interior and trunk volume becomes the reason for the sale. The car has already been sold, to my regret. The reason, the family has become bigger, and all are not included. I had to sell the car when there was a child and the necessity to carry a stroller, and not only, I would not have sold it for anything, if not for the appearance of a child. Capacity, probably. It is the most important minus in connection with which I decided to change the car, having driven only 4 months. When I took it, I thought it would be enough, but it turned out otherwise. In general, the owners praise the convenience and ergonomics of the driver's workplace. Everything is convenient and well thought out. The control panel is slightly turned to the driver. The adjustment ranges, as in any German, are huge. The driver's seat is height adjustable. In the city you can sit higher and control dimensions, and you can fall on the bottom and push on the highway. Naturally, in any question concerning convenience, by definition, there cannot be complete unanimity. For example, many people note not the most convenient access to the cabin, which we have already mentioned. The very process of getting in and out of the driver's seat is very inconvenient, and I am not even talking about passengers literally fall in and fall out of the car, which at my height of 195 centimeters looks somewhat comical. The inconvenience of the seat height adjustment itself is repeatedly mentioned. You lift the handle and jump to make the seat go down. A clear original invented this. Because of the steering wheel you can't see the indicator of the rain sensor. The control unit of the windows on the driver's door is located so that you have to bend your hand very much to use it, though not everyone agrees with this statement. The very sporty semi-reclining seat is considered by some authors of reviews as a dignity and others as a disadvantage. For example, in any cars with low, semi-recumbent seating, after an hour and a half my lower back starts to whine, and behind the wheel of off-roaders with their seating of the Yankshik on the heel type I can spend the whole day without breaks. There is no unanimity in the assessment of seats, especially since different versions were equipped with quite different seats. But even owners of identical bodies speak very differently about the seats. Some of them write that the car is not very suitable for long distances, and first of all, because of not very comfortable seats. They say that 2 hours behind a wheel it will not be difficult to sit, but a longer trip will not once make you go out and stretch your back. Seats are very hard. In the city is the best, but you will not be enough for a long time. Others, on the contrary, enthusiastically tell about the fact that in the seats of coupe you can swallow 100 kilometers After another, the seats, standard shape, 2-color optional upholstery, appreciated on a long trip, not a gram of fatigue. I had to go to the Crimea twice in a month, almost 8,000 kilometers on broken roads. Excellent, comfortable seats, nothing hurt or got cramped. Finally, almost all authors of reviews positively assess noise insulation. In the worst case, they note that the noise level in the cabin is slightly higher than in the older models of the brand, but in any case lower than in the salons of classmates. At speeds over 120 km per hour you can normally talk or listen to music without increasing the sound level. Noise insulation in the unit, 4 points out of 5. You can hear the disruptive air streams from different body parts, but there is not much discomfort from it. But in the vast majority of reviews the authors believe that noise insulation is excellent and do not write down the installation of additional noise insulation in the list of necessary costs. Quite a lot of negativity is expressed by owners about the car suspension. The range of evaluations from the suspension is still a bit stiff, and potholes are sometimes quite appreciable to the suspension is just dubovia, as if you go on a course. In any case it spoils the general impression of the car. The car is made for good roads, which the Crimean Peninsula cannot boast of. Therefore, storming local directions I got high not always. The car, of course, is more urban, for smooth roads. On the highway Tula, Moscow, the road is after bombing, every pothole is felt. And even quite serviceable suspension tends to rattle unpleasantly on bumps. On the other hand, the authors of reviews find positive sides in this rigidity. Firstly, they realize that rigidity is a payment for controllability, but we will talk about it more. And secondly, the owners are comforted by the fact that on the highway passengers shake, but do not get carsick. One more problem is connected with the size of ground clearance. In the majority of completions it makes 140 to 147 mm, and in powerful 135i and at all 132, and even 121 mm. The authors of reviews write that the ground clearance does not allow you to drive outside the city fully, that you cannot drive on the curb and that you have to move off the asphalt with great caution. You can drive it to the forest and fishing, but it is better to leave it on the asphalt and then on foot. But the biggest problems await the owners of the one in winter time. A small ground clearance combined with rear-wheel drive turns into a rattling mixture, especially if the driver is not the most experienced. I got stuck 3 times in a year or so. It is cured by an iron shovel, which is in the trunk in case we have not only to dig, but also to chisel ice. I get stuck literally in a flat place. For 2 weeks we pushed the car out 20 times. It gets on its belly where moms with strollers go. And my husband experience is much more than mine. Get stuck. Winter is, of course, hell in terms of getting stuck even in small snowdrifts in the parking lot, even which is cleaned. However, in many reviews the authors write that everything is not so terrible, that they have never been stuck, although they have not climbed anywhere in particular, that it is simply not necessary to drive backwards into a snowdrift on the rear drive. That's why you won't get stuck. The specifics of rear-wheel drive also contribute. Before turns, I brake almost to a complete stop and literally roll in at a maximum of 20 km per hour. I don't even want to write about traffic circles, and moving uphill on mush is an attraction with the rear of the car walking in all directions. On ice, a car shod in new Michelin-studded rubber is simply helpless. The rear skids very much. If you get stuck on ice, everything, of course, you have to get used to rear-wheel drive. When over-throttling, literally the rear can overtake the front, but as soon as I learned to drive in tension, the problem disappeared. I will tell so, the car is not afraid of snow, ice too, but it does not like snow mush. It can try to go into a skid. However, if the driver is competent and the car is equipped with high-quality winter tires, the rear-wheel drive turns from a problem into a source of joy. Everyone was afraid of winter, but even some kind of a thrill appeared from it. The systems at skids work just perfectly. The car is leveled by itself. The systems work so clearly that you remember about a rear drive only when on a slippery road. By habit you start to gas in a turn, and the pictogram lights up. In winter, certainly, there are inconveniences with driving out of loose snow, but if you got out, you are the king of roads. Rear-wheel drive in winter time gives a lot of emotions. Driving in winter is just a miracle. You drive at a decent speed, within Reason, of course, to a corner, turn the steering wheel, and as soon as the car starts to go into a skid, the stabilization system intervenes, and as if someone for you turns the car in the direction you were going to go. In a BMW, the main thing is to get off the ground, I mean snow and snowdrifts, and it's almost impossible to throw it off the track. Nevertheless, in a number of reviews, owners write that it is better not to drive a BMW 1 Series on the highway in winter, as jokes. With rear-wheel drive in our extreme conditions are fraught. On winter streets of large cities, still far enough, but in yards it is better to drive less. And if you do have to go in, you should keep a tow rope ready. But the peculiarities of driving a rear-wheel drive car in difficult road conditions and the tendency of unicycles to sit on their bellies even in not the deepest snow are not all the winter problems faced by the owners of these cars. At least in several reviews the authors complain that at temperatures of -35 degrees and below 1.6-litre motors can refuse to start, and automatic boxes go into emergency mode. Secondly, owners complain about monstrously fast consumption of washer fluid. According to them, even a full tank of 6 litres is enough for only 50 to 60 kilometres. The reason lies in the headlight washers, which literally drain the washer fluid. It is difficult to disconnect them peacefully, the fuse will not work either, it is one for the whole washer system, including windshield wipers. There are two options to solve the problem. The first is to go to the service and disconnect the power from the motors, the second, before each spraying of the glass to turn off the headlights. In this case, the headlight washers do not work, and the liquid is enough for a week, or even more. At the same time, the desire to turn off the headlights and save washer fluid is at odds with the desire to see something at least. In the dark, owners complain that the light of the headlights is very dim, at least in the case of halogen sources and the headlights get dirty very quickly. It's scary to drive at night on an unlit road without other cars. Another factor that worsens visibility is the intelligent mode of heating of side mirrors, which independently turns on and off the heating at a certain temperature outside. To put it mildly, not the most convenient solution, write the owners. Indeed, if it's not cold enough and it's raining outside, you can't turn on the heating forcibly, no separate button is provided. When the mirrors are all in drops, you have to go out and wipe with a napkin. But even more trouble can be caused by the frameless windows of two-doors, which have the unpleasant habit of sticking to the seals. The doors are frameless, and each time I open them, the windows are lowered by half a centimeter. So, in the frost they sometimes do not want to rise back up, the door does not slam, and the car does not stand on the alarm. In winter, the glass of the right door stuck to the rubber because of frost, and here is such a peculiarity: when you open the door the glass is lowered, you close it, it comes back and goes into the groove in the body. So I opened the door, but the glass did not go down, and refused to go down from now on, even after thawing. In the service they said, to change the whole window elevator assembly. In general, the recommendation, do not drive in winter, there is nothing to torture it, does not look like such a big exaggeration. The authors of many reviews note that the BMW 1 Series is primarily a city car, and that it is in city conditions that its potential is revealed to the fullest. Especially it concerns the 116i model with its 116 horsepower atmospheric engine. Coupe is a 100% city car. Do not repeat our mistakes, do not try to go on it to the sea or to the mountains, one of the owners writes in the review. The lack of a spare tire, the possible absence of cruise control in the package, the lack of dynamics for complex overtaking, these are the shortcomings that can ruin the whole trip. For me, for example, it was a problem to keep my foot on the pedal all 5,000 kilometers of our trip. But in the city there are no questions to the car, neither in dimensions nor in dynamics, notes the author of this review. Others are ready to support his point of view. I can say the following about the 116 horsepower engine: yes, it's a bit small, but it's not enough for starting from traffic lights. For sharp driving in the city it is quite enough, and I don't feel inferior. For a city it is enough for eyes, if you are not a fan of driving 200 plus, but for this you should look at the 3-liter version. The small motor is really weak for aggressive driving, but it is quite enough to dominate in a city stream due to controllability of a chassis. In city conditions the compactness of the 1 also has a positive effect. Small size, it is convenient to park and make transfers. I work in the center of Moscow, so the main requirement for the car was small size. The car fulfills its task to the full. It is easy to park in a tiny place, squeezes through even in narrow alleys. It is easy to find a parking place. It is convenient to park or get through the city center. Maneuverability is at its best. In short, those who write that BMW 1 Series is an ideal car for the city, and there are a lot of such cars, have all grounds for it. In fact, the BMW 1 Series is quite a complex and quite demanding car, which means that it has plenty of characteristic sore spots. We've devoted a detailed article to engine and gearbox problems, a detailed article. Everything is told there, both about oil caps and stretched timing chains. Here we will only add a particular example of how expensive the stretched and not replaced in time chain diesel N47 D20A, the combination of all factors led to the destruction of the cylinder block. Bought a new one with pistons, 485 rubles. For the original, new balancer shafts, 2 times 4,621 is equal to 9,242 rubles. For the original and pinion gear, 4,849 rubles. For the original, this updated unit is fitted with lighter balancer shafts from the N47 D20C motor, from the coupe F20, Fresh X1, etc., which is 184 horsepower. Plus additional packaging, 3,000 rubles. Total, 142,576 rubles plus all sorts of little things for 57,617 rubles, and works in accordance with the current standards for repair and maintenance of BMW cars. At the same time, not all owners face engine failures, but problems related to the rear axle gearbox are possible for many powerful 120D and 130i. I shudder every time I think of the clinically unreliable unit of this car, the rear axle gearbox. In a couple years of owning the car I have changed it 3 times. Repair helps in rare cases, more often you need to replace. The last time I searched for 2 weeks, you can't find a live one at the dismantling. A new one costs as much as a quarter of the car. There was a problem with a rumble in the back of the car. I searched the forums. I found out that this problem is mass. The rear axle gearbox is humming. But the electrical problems are mentioned, if not in every first, then in every second review. The most frequently mentioned failures are related to the battery located in the trunk and the main power circuit. Emergency circuit breakers on the plus terminal of the battery fail, and their replacement costs about 8,800 to 9,000 rubles. Most of all owners are surprised and annoyed by design decisions. The main power cable plus is led out through a stud under the bottom to the street, which causes corrosion and destruction. Fire may occur. It would be interesting to know on what basis this decision is based. Such a bug as oxidation of this wire in the place of connection to the box is present in all 1 and 3. Unluckily located heater motors that get wet regularly burn, starters fail. In general, irritated owners write, electrics are something. Light bulbs burn all around. Oil is checked only through the control panel, and if the sensor glitched, it is unreal to find out whether there is oil left. While driving, all bulbs on the dashboard lit up at once, speedometer and tachometer arrows started jumping randomly, and the car was urgently asked to the service station. It turned out that due to moisture the sensor responsible for the computer died. The car was returned with the words, "Don't spill liquids in the trunk." The voltage on the brains and dashboard completely disappeared. The car was left standing in the yard in winter with an open window. The reason, a broken wire under the door trim. Why the wire burned out is unknown. Why the wire burned and not the fuse, also unknown. The work cost 2,000 and diagnostics 10,000, and they worked a full day. And what is frustrating is that any minor electrical problems can lead to the need to go to the service and reflash the brains. After I'd been lit up with wires from another car, the module responsible for the electrics broke down. I came to the dealer. They announced 22,000 for a new module and 6,000 for the work, but I am not a major to pay money to all sorts of scammers. It turned out that it just needs to be reflashed, and this pleasure costs, you won't believe it, 3,000 rubles and 2 hours of time in the service. Anything goes wrong and you have to reflash it. Last week, one smart guy at the service took out the battery, something got on it, and the car would not start. I had to go to the firmware, 7,000 rubles. When it has all the power out, it means you have to go for a flashing, without headlights and heater. In the trunk there is always a flashing light bulb on a battery from Alec for 100 rubles to put in the back if the electricity goes out. There are other small, but no less unpleasant faults. Drainage clogging often happens, which can cause puddles under the carpets in the cabin. Air conditioner tubes rot, the hood lock oxidizes and seizes. But these are really trifles. After all the described horrors, it may seem that in the reviews the authors will curse their broken bucket with nuts, which only by misunderstanding receive the nameplate and the proud name BMW. It's nothing like that. In a mass of reviews their authors write, the car is reliable, at qualitative service, only consumables, if you need a car for trips, including, sat down and drove without thinking, it is your faithful friend for many years without headache. Tested by experience of operation, took in 2018 7-year auto, 2011. During the operation, there were no problems with this handsome man. All this, of course, does not mean that units do not break down. They break, what is there? But the cost of current repair and frequency of its necessity the majority of owners estimate as quite acceptable. Even some original parts are not that expensive, and non-original parts are simply a lot. True, the amounts indicated in the owner's reviews cannot be taken as actual data today, since many years have passed since some of them were written. Nevertheless, it is possible to read with a share of nostalgia, for example, such as, a litre of native oil costs 500p. Filters, 300p, cabin filter 1000p, candles, 150p. Piece, lambda 3500p, hoist motor, 5000p, pads in front, 2500p. Rear 1500, sensors 200. In general, it is tolerable if you do not buy boxes with the inscription BMW and use quality non-original. The owner of any age car sooner or later will have to face the need to intervene in the suspension. One is not an exception, but the work to bring the suspension in order will not ruin the owner, especially if you use quality non-original parts. I was pleasantly surprised by the cost of spare parts and sufficient simplicity of the suspension. Levers from 1.5 to 4,000, and for 2,000 you can buy Lemfeder, Packer Original, corrected to the date of writing the review, ed. Stabilizer struts up to 1,000, bushings, 500p. And so on. All works not related to electrics you can safely do at non-officials. The car is not so complicated. As for maintenance, none of the authors of reviews wrote that the maintenance costs almost for nothing, but the cost of maintenance is also rarely recorded as a significant disadvantage. Mostly owners write that maintenance is affordable and does not cause a catastrophic blow to the wallet. The cost of service is comparable to any European car, not cheap, but not very expensive. It does not strain on service. Maintenance is affordable. Consumables, even original ones, are also available. The cost of ownership is at the level of classmates, at that, non-premium. By the way, the topic of interval is raised not accidentally. The matter is that the onboard computer itself writes when it is necessary to change these or those consumables, which makes it possible to visit the service when necessary and to carry out routine maintenance, so to speak, in installments. Accordingly, the figures of the cost of maintenance, which are called by the owners, do not strike the imagination: 7,000, 10,000, 12,000 rubles. As for the consumption, the picture looks a bit more complicated. First of all, the large range of engines, the power of which differs in times, has an impact. It is clear that a 300 horsepower car cannot have the same appetite as a modest small car with 115 horsepower. Thus rather big consumption of 3-litre 135i and 125i owners do not bother at all, as they knew what they bought, and consider the expense as adequate payment for hurricane dynamics. The beast eats gasoline in buckets, minimum 10 litres on the highway, minimum 14 litres in the city, and it is if to rush. But it is impossible to hustle. The result is predictable, 18 to 20 litres per 100 kilometres. But on the other hand, this consumption is not a pity. There would be a bigger tank, but it is what it is, 55 litres, writes the owner of 306 horsepower 135i. Consumption in the city 10 to 12 litres 100 kilometre, if you do not go, but you will go, because the sound of the inline 3-litre 6. And dynamics, 6 to 6.2 seconds to 100 disposes to it, echoed by the owner of 125i with a capacity of 218 horsepower. The average consumption looks like this: city, in average mode 12 to 13 L 100 km, with active driving 15 to 16 L 100 km, but if you go on the highway on cruise control, you can manage in 8 L 100 km. Naturally, on the other pole of economy, diesel 120D. Owners estimate the consumption as 5 L 100 km on the highway and 6 to 7 L 100 km in the city with working air conditioning. But the biggest disputes are observed in a numerous cohort of owners of 116i. Both figures and estimations differ. In some reviews it is possible to read that, at quiet driving in a mixed cycle it is about 10.5 litres. But it is worth to push a little bit in the city, and 17 litres as from a bush. If you start from traffic lights constantly, you can get to 25 litres. In others, that the expense above 7.8 litres 100 km is not received even at dynamic driving. Perhaps the most balanced assessment can be considered as follows: fuel consumption 7 to 8 L 100 km on the highway and 10 to 12 in the city. The tank in the city is enough for 400 to 450 km, on the highway for 550 to 600 km. As you know, instead of a spare tire in the trunk of the BMW 1 Series there is a battery and a can of sealant due to the use of run-flat tires. Such tires have a particularly strong sidewall and a wide sidewall ring with additional reinforcement in case of a tread puncture. Does not allow the tire to sag under the weight of the car and keeps it on the move, allowing you to get to the tire repair shop even in case of serious damage. It should be said that Russian owners have a more than ambiguous attitude to this innovation. First, they do not like the rigidity of these tires, which, combined with the rigidity of the suspension itself, turns the car into a bone shaker. What they do not like: hard run-flat rubber. First of all, it's really stiff to drive. Secondly, in my opinion, some traction is not very good, terrible run-flat. If before buying a BMW I knew what a run-flat is, I would avoid it like fire. Every bump, rut, stones, bridge joints, everything is felt, and very strongly. Others, recognizing rigidity as such, believe that it is an acceptable price for controllability. Yesterday I put on summer wheels. A 17 run flat, just wooden. After winter rubber I got used to it. There are, of course, and pluses: not afraid of punctures, great handling, but stiff. What can I do? I drove half of the summer on run flat, stiff, but it steers perfectly. Then I bought ordinary Bridgestone. It feels like the car has been replaced. It became wobbly, lost its former sharpness. I drove and cried. But I got comfort in the city. Now I can drive up to the house on a broken road without any problems, and I stopped feeling small bumps with my ass. But many people are confused by the very idea of driving on Russian roads without a spare tire. Of course, I appreciate that they put a can for repairing a tire which can't be used properly in winter or at night on the highway, but now it's not about it. What do you do when you get a cut with a really big hole in the tire? Not even a roll cage, ran flats, and if you go to the backwards, you have to either take a spare or rely on luck. If you go without luck but with a spare, the trunk is halved. Trouble: a big disadvantage is the lack of a spare. I grabbed a nail in the sidewall on the Kutuzovskaya overpass and had to roll back and forth with the wheel. Fun and drive, drive and fun, endless pleasure from driving. This is what the authors of the overwhelming majority of reviews tell about. Of course, not everyone is delighted with the dynamics of the one, even with average motors with capacity of 136 to 156 horsepower. The ride is mediocre. I understand what to expect from 136 horsepower with automatic, but still. After 140 dynamics is absent, with difficulty gains 210 on a speedometer, 2 liters and 156 h. P. For the car weighing almost 1.4 tons, it is not much and not little, but quite enough for confident movement in a city stream and on a highway. I cannot say that Kopek shoots a bullet from a place. The owners of a few 135 I can write: a beast lives under the hood. A wild boar. When pressing on the gas pedal, it snorts, spits, and then whips the speedometer so that, having moved to another car, by habit when pressing on the gas pedal you press your chin. The dynamics of 116i, of course, is much more modest. Owners of such cars can, of course, write that dynamics pleasantly surprised, but then they will specify that only at first. Rather, they will note that on a highway the automobile pleases with imperceptibility and smoothness of work of the automatic, that the automatic transmission adjusts to a style of driving, that in extreme case there are manual and sports modes, and that if to use the last at overtaking on a highway, settings of electronics successfully at sharpness to 1.6-liter motor. But even modest dynamic possibilities do not prevent to experience the real driver's emotions. I drove 400 kilometers on a country highway. Not a single car overtook me, not a single Jeepard did not overtake me. What is not a turn, then full pants of emotions? And here is how one of the owners describes his first trip on the acquired one. The road is rutted, the asphalt is being changed. There are some hatches sticking out, as usual, chaotically scattered on the roadway. The speed is 40 to 60. The first thought, I won't bypass everything. I move the steering wheel right-left. Whoops. All gone. Unrealistically clean steering wheel, unrealistically precise following of the chosen trajectory. Fun. Yeah, it's all about handling. Drivability. BMW-ish. I was amazed. I thought the penny wasn't serious. But it's not like that, it's all grown up. The more you drive, the less you want to get out of the car. Feel yourself a daring conqueror of urban and suburban tracks. Only adrenaline, delight and desire to go. The handling in summer is perfect. I am not afraid of this word. A car that avoids accidents. Very sharp steering wheel, instant responsive automatic transmission and motor, and also systems ABS and ESP on any desires of the driver. Actually, even winter, the time of the year when BMW 1 Series feel not too cozy, can also bring joy. In winter you want to drive sideways more and more often, and this desire wakes up in you by itself, and if it snows, we turn off the control system and drift. As a result, the words of a man who bought a one in a terrible condition and spent more than $370,000 to bring it to its senses. Do not look like an awkward self-justification at all. I gave the coupe a new life. I did not let it die somewhere on the dismantling. Let now as a token of gratitude. It gives me pleasure for a long, long time, winding kilometers on the tires. In conclusion, the BMW 1 Series I E81, E82, E87, E88 presents a compelling case for both buyers and those who may want to think twice. With its sporty design, engaging driving experience, and premium features, it certainly appeals to enthusiasts. However, potential drawbacks such as maintenance costs, limited rear space, and fuel efficiency should not be overlooked. Ultimately, whether this model is the right choice for you depends on your personal preferences and priorities. We hope this video has helped you weigh the pros and cons effectively. Thank you for watching and happy car hunting.